And thank you for joining us. You are watching the National News Desk, America's News Now, as we start with some breaking news this morning. Iran facing a massive crisis that could destroy the regime, with Tehran's power rapidly weakening and residents demanding a revolution. I'm Jan Jeffcoat. It's Monday, January 12th. In just a few hours, President Trump set to meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where they could reportedly weigh military options as chaos and violence does continue erupting on the streets there of Iran, with the regime's forces killing hundreds of protesters already.
There seem to be some people killed that aren't supposed to be killed. These are violent, if you call them leaders, I don't know if they're leaders or just they rule through violence. But we're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options. We'll make a determination.
And we want to get right to Mark Boyle at the live desk with the very latest for us right now. Mark, Trump also said Iran has reached out and wants to negotiate. So what are you learning this morning?
Well, we know that the Trump administration looks to get going early this morning on the possible future with Iran. What that would look like, it's not clear yet, Jan. It's a quickly evolving story. Those leaders in Iran are looking to work with the U.S., though, to avoid any more military intervention in the Middle Eastern nation. All of this comes as the third week of the nationwide anti-government protests continue.
Iran wants to negotiate, yes. We may meet with them. I mean, a meeting is being set up, but we may have to act because of what's happening before the meeting. But a meeting is being set up.
So far, more than 500 people have been killed, and that's on top of the more than 10,000 others who have been arrested and transferred to prisons as well. Communications still down across Iran, making it even more difficult to get information out across the country. This is now day 4 of no internet access for that region, with the State Department saying Iran is trying to make it even harder for human rights abuse information to come out. So right now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. leaders are coming together to talk about military action, or the possible of military action there. Over the weekend, the Prime Minister had phone conversations with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, more expected later this week. Meantime, back here at home, an anti-Iranian protest turned violent in the past 24 hours. You can see some of the video there. That U-Haul truck driving right into a crowd of protesters, with a sign on the side saying discouraging the military intervention in Iran. At least 2 people were hurt. This happened in Los Angeles. Protesters eventually swarmed that truck, smashed the windows. Police moved in and arrested the driver. Detectives are still investigating that situation. We're following all of this for you across the country this morning right here at the live desk.
New conflicts continue heating up around the globe while the same wars rage on for years. The Global Peace Index reports recent data shows we've hit the highest number of current conflicts around the world since World War II. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team, and obviously the largest conflicts of the world right now. We've discussed at length every single day, but where is the U.S. indirectly involved? There's a long list aside from Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no direct involvement, obviously, but we are indirectly involved in many different ways, and we have a military presence in different regions still. So just getting down to the basics here, American forces are directly engaged in limited combat and counterterrorism operations in places like Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Somalia, while we're indirectly backing allies through things like weapons, funding, intelligence, and deterrence in conflicts like Ukraine, obviously Ukraine, Russia, and then Israel, Gaza. Also Taiwan-China tensions. So compared to past decades, this shows a shift away from these large ground wars and more towards persistent, global, lower-level military engagement and proxy conflicts, often without these formal war declarations like we used to see in the past.
And there have been reports of tensions between Iran and Israel ramping up.
Yeah.
What's the status of that? We're starting to see the protests here.
Yeah, I know. So there was a brief clash, at least in a ceasefire last year that happened. Both sides, though, say that they don't want a full-scale war, yet they're openly preparing for one if things escalate. So that's important to note. So Israel's continuing strikes against Iran-backed groups like Hezbollah, and Iran is signaling it's really ready to respond, making this a fragile standoff where miscalculation or proxy attacks even could really spiral into a larger conflict at hand.
Yeah, Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.
I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. Iran is teetering under the weight of a collapsing economy as protests are up nationwide and basic food prices skyrocket. A spiraling economy in Iran continues fueling widespread protests across the nation. Consumers feeling the sting of out-of-control inflation.
A week ago, I bought a tray of eggs for 2,200,000 reals. Today, I bought one for 3,500,000.
And shopkeepers say empty stores and disappearing customers are becoming the norm.
Market conditions are not good at all.
President Trump backing the protesters on Truth Social, writing, "If Iran violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go." Iran's army commander-in-chief responding to the threat.
Today, there are no doubts about the hostility of the U.S. President and the criminal Prime Minister of Israel towards the Iranian nation. They allow themselves to meddle in this internal affair of ours. They tweet, they talk, they have been enemies throughout history.
The day after Trump's Truth Social post, the American military captured Iran's ally, Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela. Reports now emerging that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has prepared a contingency plan to flee Tehran if security forces lose control, with Moscow as his reported destination. A route that mirrors the path taken by Syria's Bashar al-Assad when his security collapsed in December of 2024. Iran has long been seen as a destabilizing force in the Middle East, funding terror proxy groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. If the Islamic Republic falls, some experts argue it won't necessarily mean more stability for the region. There's no clear opposition to take control of the country, and there are high risks of internal chaos. Some experts predict the biggest beneficiaries, should the Iranian regime collapse, will be Iraq and the Gulf states in the short term. However, in the long term, Turkey is positioned to make the most gains. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
In other news now, the Trump administration continues its crackdown on countries that are hostile to the U.S., announcing new sanctions on Venezuela and Iran for developing and trading combat drones. At the same time, the U.S. is giving the Iran-backed terror group Hamas 2 months to disarm. The U.S. announced the deadline in an agreement with Israel about the future of Gaza.
New government in Gaza is possible if you disarm Hamas, because no one's going to come in there if Hamas stays armed, and they'll put a bullet right through the back of their head, anyone of any potential new government. So the answer to your question is, if we disarm Hamas, whether with an international force or by any other means, yes, I see a different future for Gaza. And it's the one remaining step. Everybody understands that.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there saying a new government could be established in Gaza in the coming year as long as Hamas surrenders its weapons and leaves from the region.
Now President Trump is issuing fresh warnings to Iran following talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The National News Desk, Kelly Gaskins, reports that it comes even as Tehran fires back with its own threats.
President Donald Trump is escalating pressure on Iran, warning of serious consequences should Tehran attempt to rebuild its nuclear or missile capabilities.
If it's confirmed, look, they know the consequences. Consequences will be very powerful. Maybe more powerful than the last time.
Trump addressing concerns Iran may be trying to reconstruct nuclear sites after U.S. strikes earlier this year. The allegations remain unconfirmed.
I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup.
Trump making the remarks after meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, where Iran and regional security dominated the agenda. Iran's president quickly responding on X, writing, quote, "The response of the Islamic Republic of Iran to any oppressive aggression will be harsh and regrettable." Meanwhile, Iran International reporting the country is accelerating work on developing chemical or biological weapons. Iran denies those claims. Amid this heavy international scrutiny, unrest boiling within the country, where protests against the regime erupting over high prices, runaway inflation, and political repression. Verified videos posted on social media showed demonstrations Monday at an upscale shopping mall near Tehran's main bazaar. The size of the protests could not be independently confirmed, but demonstrations erupted in multiple locations across the country, signaling growing public frustration with Iran's leadership. The unrest comes as Iranian authorities intensify a crackdown on dissent. Human rights groups say the government has arrested key opponents and carried out the highest number of executions this year in nearly 4 decades, part of an effort to prevent a broader uprising. I'm Kayla Gaskins, reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.